Welcome, welcome back to another edition of Success Talk. This is Dr. Herbert Harris, and I want to welcome you to that place on the internet where people are talking about success. We are interviewing a number of people who have accomplished great things, but also who have experienced great challenges and had some incredible breakthroughs. I want you to hear their stories, and from these stories, see yourself, take ideas, take some of the thoughts, because the story you hear may be the one that can change the life you live. So this is Dr. Herbert Harris, and our guest today is a beautiful young lady, Eva Brito. Did I pronounce it correct?
Yes, you could say Brito is in my native language of Cape Verdean Creole, but Brito too. Either way, it's
Wow.
fine.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate your being here. And we had some conversations before, but I just appreciate that useful, creative perspective. And so I say, welcome to Success Talk. And what I'd love to do is, have our listeners get a little sense of, we see where you are right now, and we're going to learn a lot more about some of the things that you're doing, but a little about your background. You from Cape Verde Islands?
Yes. So I am a proud Cape Verdean, or what they would say Criolla, which is a Cape Verdean woman. I was born there, and that's where my parents are from. So that is really where my roots and heart lays. And then I came as a young girl to the United States with my family, but luckily, my parents always kept us connected to our history and roots, and we'd go back during the summers. So that is my favorite place on earth. And if you ever get a chance to visit, it is beautiful, beautiful landscape, beautiful culture, beautiful music. As you know, our African people, we're ones that keep the heart warm in many ways.
Wow. Now, how far are the islands off the coast of Africa? So they're off the west coast of Africa.
They're about 500 miles from West Africa near Senegal.
So 500 miles.
So
Okay.
they're
Yeah.
right near the equator off the west
Uh-huh.
coast of Africa, about 500 miles.
Yeah. So that's kind of with the United States, kind of like Bermuda. It's about 500 miles east of the United States. So it's pretty easily accessible then. Mhm. Mhm. So now, just maybe just a little history about the Cape Verde Islands, because it's off the coast of Africa, but the people there seem to be a collection, an amalgamation of different cultures. What's a little background on that?
Sure. So the Cape Verde Islands is unique in that it's right near the equator, and it was part of the transatlantic slave trade in the sense that our backgrounds are very mixed. We were colonized by the Portuguese. And so our language is a mixture, our Creole is a mixture of Cape Verdean Creole, which is a mixture of Portuguese and African dialect. And during that time, that it was discovered by the Portuguese, and during the times of transatlantic slave trade.
Just a little background on the Cape Verde Islands and on the heritage.
Sure.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, the Cape Verde Islands is located on the west coast of Africa, about 500 miles away from Senegal, and its history also relates to the struggle for African liberation. We were colonized by the Portuguese, and so for many years, and our language is a mixture of Portuguese and African dialects. And our background is a mixture of that as well, and many other cultures, because during the transatlantic slave trade, many folks would stop there and pick up folks and so forth. And so we have a mixture of many different cultures our um, within the diaspora of the 10 islands that make the Cape Verde Islands. And then in 1975, under the leadership of Amilcar Cabral, which was a revolutionary leader and fought for the liberation of Guinea-Bissau as well as Cape Verde, and they collaborated to get our independence. We still have the official language of Portuguese, but we have our own unique culture within that as colonized people.
Mm.
And we are proud, have our unique music, our unique food and culture as part of that. And many of Cape Verdeans live in the New England area, partly because of it. Many of them originally came to New Bedford, Massachusetts, where I am located because of the whaling industry and so forth. And many times you will find Cape Verdeans near Port City because of the being many of them for the way they were able to migrate was through boats and so forth prior to airplanes.
Mm. Yeah, so being an island, the only way to get there and to leave is by boat. And you were just saying there are 10 islands. I was not aware of 10 islands. And are they all inhabited?
All except one. So 9 of them are inhabited, and they're all very unique. On one island, there's an active volcano. Some of them are flat, some of them are mountainous. The one that has the volcano has black sand beaches. The island I'm from, Boa Vista, that is white sand, gorgeous, known for its tourist attraction from the beaches. But they're all unique. So it's almost like visiting different states. They all have its own culture, but all have this beautiful essence within all of them.
Wow. Now, I was not aware of a black sand beach. Is that like volcanic pumice or something?
My understanding is that it's black sand because of the volcano. It was my first time going to a black sand beach, so and my island is totally different. So it was
Uh-huh.
interesting to just travel, a half an hour and see something totally different. But because of the volcanoes, there has this black sand beaches, and there's another island that I understand too has the black sand beaches, and I think because it's close to that one. So it's due to the volcanoes, my understanding. And I climbed the volcano at one point, so that was pretty cool as well.
Wow. Well, I just, something, one of the things I love about doing these interviews, I learn so much. Now, I have to go now to the islands because I need to go see a black sand beach. Wow.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And once you go, you're not going to want to come back. You're going to be a return visitor, I
Yeah.
promise.
So now the indigenous people before the Portuguese came, there were people there, correct?
My understanding is there were. I mean, some people will say that it was an inhabitant and the Portuguese came, but I don't believe that narrative to be true. There
Uh-huh.
were some there, and then as many colonized nations, the Portuguese, culture and domination of the land said they were the first ones there, but I don't believe that to be true. I believe there were indigenous people there
People there. Yeah.
prior to.
The colonization.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Right.
interesting because I have this theory that and it's not my theory, but there was when you look at the land mass, North America, South America, Europe, and there at one time that was one big piece of land, and over
Mhm.
the millions of years it began to expand and broke apart. And so when you look at, for example, the west coast of Africa and the east coast of South America, it looks like at one point they fitted together. And
Mhm.
and then in this breaking away process, these different islands like the Cape Verde Islands, the Caribbean islands, all of these seem to be like little pieces of that big piece that split away, which kind of it makes sense when you think about it. So I sometimes think that when we look at some of these islands, if we could go down into the water, that we may find an entire new evidence of an entirely new culture. That all the stuff that we're doing right now was done before in the world.
Right. They say nothing underneath the sun is new, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
it's
So
true. And we can't even go to the depths of the seas, we
yes,
only can go so far. So imagine how much is there that we don't even know about.
yeah, yeah. So now tell us a little about what you're doing now.
What am I doing now? So I'm at an exciting point in my life. I started my own business. I am an entrepreneur, and I've always been an entrepreneur because I'm an artist. I'm a visual performing artist. So I've always done that on the side. But recently, in 2021, I went full force behind that, and that was really a calling that I followed, a spiritual calling. I had done a lot of work within the social service area. I'm a licensed social worker. Prior to, I was working at a community college. I was the director of a women's center there. the inaugural director, which was an awesome role to establish a women's center from scratch and look at how you can best service the women that I was working with. And it was rewarding in many fronts, but I felt like I needed to um, create a space that was outside of the college and really a space that used my background as a licensed social worker, as an artist, a visual and performing artist, and a poet. I wrote a book of poetry. And I found that my space was at the intersectionality of arts and healing and creating healing spaces for our community, especially for women, which is the background I know best in gender equity and racial equity. But in finding a space that you can use arts for healing, because that's been my life path of using art and healing to, soothe the different parts of my life when needed. So I wanted to create that same space for women, and that's Eva Brito Consultancy. Its mission is to uplift women, children, and families through the healing arts.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited to say that we just had our first retreat. We had a So Calling Women's Retreat, which was a space that 20 plus women came together, and really, it was joyous to really see women come together, nourish their body, minds, and soul in this local area. So
Wow.
that's a
So,
little bit about what I'm
so,
doing.
so that was in New Bedford, your retreat?
That was in the It was in the town over, which is in Dartmouth, Massachusetts. It's a more rural town than New Bedford. We went to Around the Bend Farm, which is a farm that really is sustainable in all their efforts that they do, and they have local source food, and I really honor the work that they do there. So I wanted somewhere that was on indigenous land that honored the people and the food that came from that. So I wanted to give these women some healthy food to nourish their body, and then provide spaces which meditation and the healing arts. We had a dance therapist, we had a sound therapist, we had women really connecting on many levels, and the ability to be free in who they wanted to be in that space, and just to silence themselves, as well as we danced together, we laughed together, we cried together, we
Wow.
hugged. And I felt so full, as well as the women. I felt full as a participant because I was intentional. I led some of the activities, but I also, as a facilitator, was just so pleased to see that women left there elated and fuller than when they came in.
Wow. Now, you know what? Now, just as you were saying that, so many women, people, you know, it's probably harder to get a group of men together, maybe like herding cats, but but so many, there are a number of women's groups now that seem to be coming together in this like holistic approach. Now, what was the name of the farm again?
The farm is called Round the Bend Farm because it's
Round the bend.
literally on a round of a bend. You go around and it's there. So it's
Okay,
a
round.
beautiful place.
Wow, round the bend farm, and that's in Dartmouth. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
Okay. Wow.
Massachusetts.
Wow. Now, what is your website? Because doing stuff like that, I know somebody's going to hear that and like, I need to meet this lady.
Yes, yes. So my website is my name. It's Eva with an I, because in my native language, as I mentioned, I is E. So it's IVA, W.IVA, then Brito is BRITO. So evabrito.com. And they can find out more about the work I do, about the women's retreat, which will be an annual retreat. We plan to do more because there's a need for healing and a need, like you said, for men and women. It's funny, I was having a conversation with my sister then, and she's like, we need this for men too. So maybe I'll in the future do one that is co-led with a other facilitator that's a male, to
Yeah,
really bring our community healing, because I
yeah.
believe in the yin and yang, that we need to have balance on both
Balance. Yeah,
ends.
yeah. Wow. So that was over the weekend, what, a 2 or 3 day?
Yes, it was a one day. The first one was a one day, and it just happened. So I'm still, feeling the effects of all the goodness that we happened over the weekend. And
Uh-huh.
that's what happens. We need spaces to fill us up, because life is
Yeah,
so often depleting us because of the many stresses we have, many, the news, this and that. So we need spaces that we can ground ourselves, that we can recharge our battery and remind ourselves. And it's called Soul Calling because it was a space of remembering. We all come with our knowing, and life sometimes takes away from that. So we need to be reminded of our calling to create, to love, to heal.
yeah. It kind of reminds me of that whole the Sankofa bird. Yeah.
Reminding of us our truth, right?
Yes, yes. Wow. Well, thank you for your work. That's important. And I think that over the years, there's so much negativity in the country right now, so much negativity in the world that people are going to be seeking these type of venues almost as an oasis, a place where you can come and recharge and reconnect with your spirituality and with your beingness. So I salute you and say thank you for your thank you for your service, because it is a service. Now, as a
No, you're
family.
absolutely right. I mean, to
Mhm,
use your analogy,
mhm.
no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You were saying something. Uh-huh.
Okay. What I was saying is, to use your analogy, it's so true that people are thirsty for this. I've done similar works in different settings, sometimes for organizations and so forth. And sometimes I'm not sure how people are going to receive it, but there's such a need for this space where people can just reflect and think about what's best for themselves and really nourish their own healing.
Yeah.
So there's a need for that.
Wow. Well, once again, thank you so much for that. As you were sharing, now you evolved to this point. Oh, I know where I was going. Now, do you have brothers and sisters? Do you come from a large family or a small family? Uh-huh.
I come from siblings wise, I'm one of three. I
Uh-huh.
have many cousins and so forth, but in terms of sibling, we're fairly small because I'm one of three. I have one sister and one brother.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And now you're the baby of the middle.
I'm the baby.
I figured that. Okay.
Oh, man.
Yes,
Yes, I'm
yes,
the baby.
yes. Well, in in evolving, from your job, many times people get in the job, that security of a job, to move into something, doing something that you love. Did you experience any challenges in making that transition? Because I think many people look at what you've done and say, man, I'd love to do that. But in making that transition from the job environment, the work environment, to being more of an entrepreneur, what were some of the challenges you faced?
Okay. And I just want to make sure you can hear me because I think the connection might be a little unstable.
Yeah, we're
Can you hear
good
me good?
now. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. Absolutely. It was definitely a challenge, or what you would might say, one of the life lessons, because I worked for the college for about 10 years. So I had a state job. I was in a comfortable position in terms of employment. And so it was easy to stay in that route. I didn't have
Mhm.
someone saying that, I was uncomfortable and I had to leave. But my decision to leave really came from a spiritual space, which is something I'm always walking my spiritual path. And for that particular year, every year I decide to follow a theme. And for that year was to follow my spirit, that I was really going to listen. And so during one of my meditations, during COVID, one of the things we had to do is reflect a lot. It said that it was your time to create something that, was really in line with your life calling to support our community. And it was going to be outside the college. And at first I was like, whoa, I was really thinking, like, is this really what I wanted to do? Because it was uncharted territory. There was a lot of comfort in the college. I was the director of the center. I created it. I had built this community with women. So there was a lot of reasons to feel uncomfortable. And there was times that I doubted myself. And when, after I put that letter that I was going to be leaving, that I was like, man, did I make the right decision? But what will I say? What always ground me was where that decision was anchored in. And it was a decision that was anchored with spirit, with God, whatever you want to call it, with the universe. And I knew that that wouldn't let me down. So even on my last day, when I was like, I'm really leaving, and had to contemplate on that, I said, when I thought about what the source of that was, I knew I was in alignment with my source, and I couldn't deny that. And that's what gave me strength to move forward. So,
Wow. That's profound. And I really want you to share that, because so often we get so locked in the job perspective and the comforts of it that we can't make that transition. Now, and I'll ask you this: before you made that, I'll call it a disconnection. Had you planned for it financially? Did you have like a kind of an exit strategy in place, or were you just moved by the spirit?
I think it was a little bit of both. Like I said, I had been working there for um, 10 years. So I had some sort of cushion. I wasn't leaving totally with nothing there. But there was definitely that knowing that, you know, I didn't leave there with another position, definitely aligned. I started my consulting company, so I didn't have someone already hiring me. But I will tell you this, and this is the beauty of like trusting and stepping on faith. I had applied for a grant to do a something related with my artistry prior to making the decision, and had, grants sometimes they take a while to get back to you. And on the day that I left my job and had all these emotions, good, bad, and indifferent, I got a notice that I got that grant. And to me, it was just a sign that I was going to be okay. I
Yeah.
did that project and moved on. So that grant wasn't going to be my next life trajectory, but
Right.
it was just like, you know what? There's that cushion. You'll be okay, because part of the grant was to pay myself. So it just reinforced that, you just have to step on faith and God will do the rest. The wise
Wow.
elder said, if you do something and it's based on selfless love and alignment, you do that action and then God will do the rest. So that was just a beautiful, it gave me that that I needed to say this is the right decision.
Wow. Yeah. Now that type of faith, that type of planning, and you're very, I think, very um, keen on seeing the connection. And it's important for our listeners to, when you step out on faith, it's very interesting. Something seems to always happen that confirms that you've made the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
In your moment of doubt, I've come home from deals and looked in the mailbox and like, man, here's a check. One day years ago, I think I was in a situation where I wanted to make a move. I knew I wanted to do it, but I was at the time saying, I don't want to use my own money. I don't want to take it out of my cash flow. It seems like a good thing to do. Maybe I'll get some investors. And the very day that I thought about doing that, I opened the mail and there's a check for $5,000. I guess one of these credit card companies had looked at my profile and they said, well, this guy's, and you look at it like, is this a real check? And it tells you, it gives you all the instructions of how to fill it in. So I'm like, wow. So so I'm gonna put it in the bank and see what happens, not. And sure enough, the check cleared, and I waited like 10 days, and then I got a letter saying, we've set up your account, and that was the exact amount that I had budgeted for the project.
Wow, I love
Yeah.
it.
So yeah. Now, are you married? Do you have kids?
I am not married. I do have a son.
Uh-huh.
So I have a beautiful baby boy. He's not, well, he's 6, so he's still, um, he might always be my baby, but I have a 6-year-old son.
Uh-huh. Now that's an interesting piece because many times to step out like that when you have a family,
Mm,
it really complicates matters. Did you have to sort of weigh that in your calculations?
absolutely. Like I said, it was not an easy decision by no means, um, being a single parent or co-parent and having that situation, I had to think about really, what was the right decision for that. And I still think it was a great decision because now I'm in a good space in terms of where I'm at with employment. But I knew that, like I said, I had budgeted financially to a certain extent. And I knew that I wanted to provide my child a quality life and balance. And what I was doing at that time, I was really working a lot. And I felt like I was not as much there for him as a parent as I wanted to. And so my intention did include him because I wanted to create a lifestyle that I was working from home. I could be present. At that time, I was homeschooling him. So he was part of my thought process, of course, as a parent, to think, how can I create a better lifestyle for him, not only financially, but as a parent to be there for him. And that was part of my intention because, as you can imagine, the pandemic with working with students, it was a lot going on. So I was working many hours. And so I decided the long term, I wanted to be there for my child and be present. And that shift as an entrepreneur would allow me to be there more.
Wow. Okay. Now that's a nice message because entrepreneurship, one of the things I've always loved about entrepreneurship is that it always gave me, I always interpreted entrepreneurship as to be able to work from home or at near home. Like, my office, I call it the studio, is down the street from my home. So I literally walk to work, you know, all my,
Beautiful.
yeah, yeah. And that's always been one of the requirements of my life. I always wanted to live near. I don't like particularly working in my home, although I have done it and it works well. But I prefer to, if it's just to walk out one house and walk down 50 feet to the house next door. But
Hmm.
that entrepreneurship, and to our listeners, that's a real important factor, because when you're on a job, you're really on somebody else's time clock. Yeah. And so, uh, in many situations, especially we're now in this, you might say, this capitalistic thrust. Let's just say 40 years ago, people expected to work on a job, work 40 years, they had a pension, and lo and behold, when they got to a certain point in their lives, they'd be okay. The whole profit module, the whole corporate, surge has transformed that, so that people don't have no expectation of having a pension anymore. that the job does not give you that type of security, and many people have not figured that out yet. They're shocked. They'll work on a job 20 years, and then they tell them, job's over, boys, go home, and give them like maybe 90 days salary. And it's like, man, I didn't plan for this. But one of the beauties of entrepreneurship is to be in charge of that. You control it, and making that very comfortable. I know it wasn't a totally smooth transition, but by planning for it, by operating, you made the transition very well. Now, what's a little about visual arts? What does that look like?
Let me see. I think I have one of my pieces next to me. So that's the one
Okay.
behind me. That's actually a piece of that's a beach that's near my house in Cape Word Island. So that's
Uh-huh.
the white sand, and it's actually the ruins of a factory on the beach. So I'm a visual artist. I'm a performing artist, and I was an artist in residence, and I kind of mixed my writing piece with my visual piece, in which I picked 10 um, poems in my book. I have a book of poetry, Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts.
Okay.
And that title is pretty much me in a nutshell. Essence speaks to my African roots and my history, my earth. Tone speaks to the water, my artistic flow that goes in many ways, whether it's, drawing or painting, whether it's performing, whether it's writing poetry. I have to create, and I believe we're all creators. We're created beings coming from the creator. Whispers, talking to or speaking to my connection with spirituality, with Mother Earth, and really always evolving as a spiritual being. And Shouts speaks to my connection with social justice and activism, and always making a point to use the arts to have critical thought and dialogue about what is happening in our world. So that's why it's titled Essence, Tones, Whispers, and Shouts. So I dabble in that in many forms. And what I was saying, I was a previous art in residence, and I picked 10 poems in my book, and I created art pieces that relate to each one. So that was a great challenge, because I've never done that before. Usually I'll use something visually to inspire my writing, but I did the opposite, in which I had a poem, and then I had to pick, how do I create a piece that reflects that poem. So that was interesting and exciting too.
Wow. Now that now now share something. In our weekend seminars, we did a weekend seminar called the
Mm-hmm.
Resurrection Seminar, and the idea was that, when you have a 1 day seminar, you see what happens. The energy move from the time you start to the time you end. When we look at the resurrection concept, say in the Bible, the 3 days of, going from the death to the Christ arisen, just not religious, but just the arisen
Right.
mind. There's something about a 3 day cycle. And so we used to start our seminars on Friday. Friday evening we'd open, and that was like the first day did certain things, and then Saturday was like a real work day. I mean, all day exercises, etc. And one of the exercises was to draw your dreams.
Mm.
And so, as you were talking about that, so you have the word picture, the words capture an idea, and then you create a visual that's congruent with the idea. And so we were basically applying that in life. That says if I have a vision, so the vision was the words of when you wrote your goals down, you write the goals down. And so that was like the poem. And then say,
Mhm.
now let's draw that poem. And some of our people, one of my favorite students down in Barbados, Dr. J, she drew that poem. She drew her vision, and 5 years later, everything she drew in the vision has manifested. So,
Wow.
yeah, so that's kind of a life application of what you're doing with the yeah.
And that's so powerful what you mentioned. One of
Uh-huh.
my I did some graduate studies in expressive arts, so what some people call art therapy. And there's so much power to creating that, imagery,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
transforming it from just the word, which is also powerful, as we know, but to create it, to create art. And that's why I want to use it as a form of healing for our people, which we've done throughout time, is that when you use art, it's a whole brain experience. You have to really immerse yourself in it. So when you're drawing that, it captures all of you. And so that image, I'm sure, was powerful for her. And the
Yes.
more we can really do that, it lends to where we need to go even faster, in my opinion.
Yes, it does. I mean, and it creates a whole vibration in your mind. Yeah. Now, in making this transition, let's look at what kind of support do you have? You know, that so often, and especially women, when women decide to go off on the entrepreneur vein or do something that maybe not as secure that and I like to think about security, but it's almost in other people's terms. You know, I'm sure that when you talked about doing what you were planning to do, when you shared it with your significant other, your family, your friends, what type of response did you get, and how did you deal with
Well, I had various responses, as you can imagine.
it?
I had some like, "Are you crazy? You're leaving a state job with a pension and this and that, blah, blah, blah." Um, and I had others that, I have really good sister friend that I've known all my life. So I was really to confide in her and confide in other mentors that really knew who I was and saw my vision. I also think it's like when you're sharing that something is close to your heart, it's understanding who you share that with and
Mm,
understanding who can see your vision. Because some often you will tell someone and they can't dare to dream as big as you are dreaming, and they might just diminish your dream because they can't understand it, right? You only know what you know. And so if they have those blinders up, and then they might deter your path. So I was really cautious on who advice I listened to. Some of them I listened and I could understand the fear they had, but understand that I was past that fear. That doesn't mean I didn't have caution and it didn't weigh all the considerations. So I'm not saying to be naive, but I also was very cautious in who I shared it with and understanding where they were in life. I was definitely interested in speaking with individuals that were ahead of where I was at, individuals that had reached more success than I was, to say, how do I get to where you're at? And do you see this positioning making sense? Because sometimes we ask advice from people that really can't see where you're at.
okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's very powerful. Yeah. So a good lesson from that, who you share your vision with, you know, who you hold close to you. Mhm. So, all right, thank you. That was,
Absolutely.
yeah. So surround yourself with good people who uplift you. Now, just a moment about the 12 Universal Laws of Success.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts about that book, how you came and how it came into your space, and you know, what impact did it have on you, and how it was there any particular area that got your attention?
Well, I just mentioned about getting advice from people that's been there. So
Mhm.
you're a prime example of that. How you came about to be in my life. I was one day, I don't know how I started following you on social media, but I did. you may have been interviewing someone that I already followed. And I said, I need to listen to this man more. So I started to listen to your Saturday sessions, and I just loved everything that you shared. And I'm at the point in my life that I want to be, a millionaire in the future. Success is my path. There's no going back at this point. So I discovered, and then when you mentioned that you would do a call, I said, I want to know more. I want to learn from this brilliant man in front of me. So thank you. I got the book now.
Uh-huh.
I'm excited. I haven't read the whole thing. Like I said, this last weekend was the retreat, and I recently got it. But I will say one of the highlights that you mentioned recently was the 12 affirmations to live by. And I'm in the process of putting that on my wall in my office, because everything that is on that list makes so much sense. And it's just that reminder that you have to continue to do the work and think about your self-image, think about, who you're speaking to, being confident and courageous, because it was a challenge to go from a space when you introduce yourself and you say, I work for this institution. If that institution has weight, then people already respect you
Yes.
to a certain extent.
Yes.
But when you
Yes.
say, I'm on my own and I'm just doing this, now you have to have the confidence to say, I'm just as valuable than when I was at the college. So it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of persistence to continue to move forward. And this book, I know, will be my guide to do that. So I'm so grateful for you and all the knowledge you put in that book.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you. So let's say we're kind of wrapping up now. Let me make sure that I often ask this. You seem so self-directed. Was there ever a time when you doubted yourself, when you just weren't sure?
Absolutely.
And how did you get through that?
Absolutely. There's been many times that I have doubted myself. I think of humans that have actual emotion to doubt yourself. I think how I best go back to that is really going back to my core, to my spirit. I meditate. I use silence to guide my thoughts. And as I mentioned before, with my initial decision, that decision came out of a calling that I heard my spirit say, you need to create healing spaces for our community. There's a need for what you have to offer through the healing arts. And that's what guided me. And there was challenges along the way, but I never doubted the source of that message. That I knew for sure was correct and was guiding my path. And as we mentioned before, there's all these checkpoints along the way that you'll meet someone that just helps you so much, or you'll do something and it brings some sort of reward. So there's been challenges and lessons along the way, but the path and light has always been direct, that it's true to who I am.
Wow. Now, what do you think is your greatest victory to date? And I know they're going to be great victories, but to date, what is your greatest victory?
My greatest victory, no doubt, is being a parent, being a mother. I think it's, divine to really create a human being in this world. And it's the most challenging and rewarding job, as I'm sure you know. But the blessing of having a child and just the joy they can bring, the reminders, and it's so often, sometimes they just tell you, the things you need to hear. So being a parent and trying to be the best parent I can be, that's the most rewarding thing and accomplishment that I've had to date. I don't think that will change.
Wow. I guess the other thought is thank you so much for that. And I can see that in everything you're doing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Kids keep you young.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now, how about distractions? When you start on this path, it seems like the moment you make a decision to go for it, all the mosquitoes, the gnats, all the things show up to just distract you. Did you experience that as you began to make your transition?
Absolutely. I mean, I was doing a lot, and I'm still doing a lot, lots good things, but sometimes doing a lot can be very distracting. And when people notice that you can create great things, they want more and more of you. So part of my lesson has been learning to say no, and really defining what makes sense. I've stepped down for some boards and some spaces that may have had great titles, but they also were very time consuming. And so often people want you on this board and they want you to do that. But if you really want to create success, in my opinion, you really need to focus, as your book speaks to, And you can't do that when you're highly distracted. And sometimes those distractions are good. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that there were any spaces that I didn't get any value from, but I where I'm at as I think of the new year coming up is really trying to focus on how I can best enhance my gifts and support the work that I want to do. And to do that, you need to be focused and not have many distractions. So I've been lessening my plate as much as possible so that when I go into a space, I can really fully give all of me and not feel as distracted.
Excellent. And you stay there. You keep your eye on the prize. Wow. You
You
know,
got it right.
you hear that phrase, but when you're really operating in the vibration of it, it's really true. That's the key. That's the thing that keeps you moving. So I guess as we wrap up, two questions I love to share. If you think back at your younger self, you know,
Mm.
your younger self, and look at where you are now, what advice would you give your younger self based on where you are right now?
I would say trust your heart. I feel
Mm,
like your heart never lies. I think as I think of my younger self, sometimes it was so hard to make a decision. I'd ask this one and I'd ask that one, and it was like such a big thing. And deep down in my heart, I knew the answer, but I was too distracted. I was too wanting to please others. I was too. So I think if I could go back, I would, in opposed to asking five people and trying to do this and do that and trying to do, I would step back and just listen to my heart. And that's been really helpful now as I'm older. When I'm not sure, then that means I need to go inward, not outward. And when I was younger, I did a lot more going outward to get answers. And now as I get older, there's a lot more going inward.
wow.
So I would say
Now,
trust your heart.
trust your heart. That's powerful. Now, I know ladies don't like to share their age, but you look like you're about 17.
I love it. I'll take it. I'll take it on any day.
Okay. So we won't go there. Okay. Now, last question. What advice would you give your older self? Now that you're on the path, what advice would you give your older self?
Wow, no one's ever asked me that. That's a great question. What advice would I give my older self? I would say probably enjoy the ride. I know
Mm,
for me, I am a hardworking individual. I strive for excellence in all I do. And what I'm trying to learn is sometimes to just have fun and enjoy the ride because the destination will always be there, but sometimes we're so focused on trying to get there that we don't enjoy it. And I thank my child for that because he keeps me present and seeing the joy. Kids love to do that and just say, like, why not just have fun with it? Um, so I hope that when I'm older that I can say I had a life that was had many accomplishments, but was also fun along the path. And I just, enjoyed the people I interacted with. I had fun because we all got to go one day. So hopefully it'll be a fun ride in the process.
wow. Now, let me tell you something. Even now, those are diamonds. As a younger person, trust your heart. And as an older person, enjoy the ride. Woo! I love it. I love it. Well, let's see. We're at the end now, and I guess I'll just ask you: is there any other insight that you would like to share? And one of the reasons that I really enjoyed this moment with you is that you represent, I'd say, a younger version of me. Really,
Wow, that's an honor. I'll take that.
yeah,
Thank you.
a much younger version. Yeah,
The 17-year-old version.
yeah, yeah. And and to just see you now taking this journey, going, I just, I just feel so just honored to see that young people, because sometimes, when at this point in my life, I look at some of the young people and I'm like, man, this is going to be a bumpy road because if these people are in charge, we're going to hit a rock. But then
Mm.
when I listen to young people like yourself, it's like, hey, you know what? We'll be fine. They'll figure it
Mm.
out. Yes. And so, any final advice or sharing you'd like to give to our audience?
Um, I think I have to lean on my artist self. I think there's so much joy that we can get from creating, and I believe we're all artists, So I would say my advice is, create, whether that creation, whatever speaks to your heart, whether it's drawing, whether it's painting, whether it's singing, whether it's cooking. We're all creators. We all have that joy when we're a kid. We can do it. And then sometimes as adults, we forget about the joy of creation and being our artistic selves. So whatever it is that brings you joy, create that, and the ride will be a better one. So that's what I would go. And I know for me, I love to create. So that's
Yes.
my 2 cents. And if you want to know more about my creations, you can always go to evabrito.com.
Beautiful. I was going evabrito.com. Go and visit this website, because I can tell you folks that this vibration that this lady is sharing, and not just sharing, but creating, is going to be transformative. And as you listen to this broadcast, I guarantee you're going to hear something where you're going to say, yeah, that's me. I had that same feeling. I had that same thought. And be inspired by it. Visit her website. And whatever you do, remember that you can be what you want to be, do what you want to do, and have whatever you desire, always knowing that the best is yet to come. And
Thank
so
you
it is.
so much for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Oh, my pleasure. And to our listeners, listen, this has been an exciting edition of Success Talk. Eva has shared, I think, a nice, fresh perspective. And it doesn't matter whether you're 22, 32, 42, or 52. I think the same things are important there, to follow your heart, to trust your feelings, to trust your soul, and to make it fun, that whatever you do, to enjoy the ride, and to have the courage to go against the grain, to step out on faith, but to stay focused on the prize. So once again, Dr. Herbert Harris saying another edition of Success Talk is in the book, and always know in your life, the best is yet to come. And so it is.